flexibility in the financing terms, as we mentioned, incentivizing new recycled water projects as being the primary goal of the resolution. We agree with the draft resolution as well as the staff report that SRF applications that currently have complete applications or financing agreements should not be eligible for this program. We appreciate the State Water Board's time this morning and the resolution to move this forward, incentivizing new recycled water projects and providing reliable, sustainable, and drought-proof water supplies. Also, as a first-time applicant for the SRF program, we also wanted to commend your staff for the work that they've done with us the last couple of months. We have been debt-free since 1998, and we haven't borrowed money in almost, since that amount of time. And it was a huge leap for me to convince the board that we should move towards that, and working with your staff on this program has been very pleasant, and I look forward to going back to my board and asking for more money. So thank you very much for making this program available.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
Sure, thank you.
It's great. Terry Mitchell, Regional SAN, Sacramento. Nice to see you.
Good morning, board members. Again, my name is Terry Mitchell. I'm with the Sacramento Regional Sanitation District, otherwise known as Regional SAN. I don't have a lot to add from the presentations this morning. Gary did an excellent job highlighting the need for recycled water projects and moving those forward. And we support the adoption of the resolution. We think it will help incentivize those projects. A few things that I would like to highlight is Regional SAN has a couple projects that we're moving forward, both in the short term and long term. One particular project would be a cogeneration facility, or helping provide recycled water, about 1,000 acre-feet per year. We also have a longer term project that can provide up to 54,000 acre-feet per year. That's a multi-benefit project that involves a lot of stakeholders, both from the environmental community, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, and the Farm Bureau. So as we look at having these incentives move forward, I would encourage the board to look and see if we can also look at these incentives moving to longer term projects. Droughts are going to be inevitable, and so these incentives with a longer term payback, the lower interest rate, if in fact bond monies come over, allow those to be able to move forward those longer term projects in the future. And there may be an opportunity to provide consideration for multi-benefit projects as well, as those projects come forward and can provide those multiple benefits. And we are pleased to hear about the senior and lien debt. I know my agency hasn't gone through the SRF program because of some of those fears, and the projects we have are very costly, so we typically go out on the bond market. But with the ability to have the longer payback periods and the ability with the subordination, it makes it very useful for us and changes the numbers to where it becomes a much more viable option to move those projects forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very helpful. All right. We thank you all very much for your attention. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back at around, around 11:15. We're reconvening. It is. I had it close to my mouth and everything. We're reconvening at 10:50. Steph, there were some things that you wanted to make sure we were aware of in the language or stuff?
There definitely is. And
Why don't you put that up before we do
sure.
discussion and more questions?
So I alluded to the fact that we had chose the 0.5% interest rate as the option because of the desire of the group that we're working with to make it as low as possible. But I wanted to make sure that it was clear we did look at other options. If, for instance, the board wanted to go with a 1% option across the board for all projects, we could do it for the same term, but we could increase the amount of money that was be available. We could go up to $800 million worth of projects as opposed to the $400 million and the $200 million at 1%. If the board would like to go, though, with what has been drafted, we do have some minor tweaks that we need to make to the language. We see there's some clarity issues that we need to bring up as far as the difference with a completed application before December 1st as opposed to ones that we already have in-house now but that we haven't set the interest rate. And we want to make sure that it's clear in the record. It doesn't change anything that we discussed as far as the projects, but in rereading the resolution, we could see that there's some I can't never say it. Thank you. That word.
All right, do you have that?
So we can read that now for the
Well,
board.
let's wait and see where we are. I just wanted
Sure.
to know what it was, and then if
Absolutely.
after we have a robust discussion, if I'm overeager, just interrupt me and say there's that language thing
Okay.
that we talked about. All right, that's good. I think it's good to open for discussion and other questions and any issues people want to flag. For example, I do want to talk a little bit about the December 1st date, so I'm going to want to come back to that. And I appreciated the discussion about being able to review and revise and see where we are. I'm a little concerned about folks who look at December 1st like I can't finish my term paper by then, even if maybe they could. And so the idea of giving them a little more time, whether it's the year Mr. Darling talked about or something in between, is appealing to me and doesn't seem to hurt. It still has the incentive in it. That's sort of one of the main ones. Otherwise, the fact that we can revisit and see where we are, and we'll probably come back and ask you for 6-month reports on this because it's such an important issue, and then we can figure out, we can keep revising this stuff. I mean, you don't want to do it too much because people are trying to plan, but we'll see where a lot of things are by then. So let me turn to my colleagues first. That's just flagging my...
I want to propose, and I'm glad I can say this at the beginning so that we can discuss it among ourselves, but I strongly, I believe there is a huge appetite out there, and I do believe that we will not have any trouble reaching the 400,000 or the 600 or the 800. And I do think there's because there are a lot of folks in the pipeline and that they will want to they will want to lock in the lower interest rate, whatever it is. My proposal is that we have a 1% across the board for 2 years, that we do revisit this in, as Tam was alluding to at the end of the year, to make sure that in fact a lot of people are coming in, and maybe we will need more money because we can go out on the bond market. And my reason for doing this is, one, disadvantaged communities do get zero still, and they will, the fund for them will be robust, particularly since it's a trend that you described. I was pleased to see that. 1% below 2.1% is still a stimulus, and is encouraging to a lot of players. And I just feel like the human nature is such that, and we've already heard some allusions to it, from speakers and others. Once we set a 0.5%, then we'll be stuck with a 0.5% I don't think we'll switch to a 1% precisely in a year. That's just human nature. And, we're all vulnerable to human nature. I think if we go straight 1%, then we can incorporate Visalia into the new interest rate, which they have this big project, and it'll be another dot in the Central Valley, which makes me happy. And I do think that, as was mentioned briefly by a few folks, it's really the suite of barriers, not just interest rates. So dealing with the senior debt, dealing with the Buy America, working with agencies on repayment structures. I think it's that suite that makes this doable. And I'll just end with an example. Bobby mentioned that a number of people who haven't come into the Water Board for money for many years. One of those is LA County Sanitation, City Sanitation. I said county, but I meant city. LA City Sanitation, because they considered us too hard to work with. Well, they're coming, and they'll come in with something really big. And so I just want to make sure that we have a robust fund, that we are open not just to those who are there already, but to those who are in the wings and are likely to come in. I know of 3 projects that are likely to come in within the year. So for that reason, I'm recommending that we go straight 1% across the board for 2 years, but to revisit this in December or in the fall when you were proposing, and make sure that we've made the right decision.
Yeah, and I think that's worth discussing. The one, just to tee off of Fran's comment, there'll be that point in time, just as we're talking about March 18th being this cutoff date, there'll be another cutoff date that we're embedding into the current proposal, where some will be early to the game, some late. So there may be some wisdom in recognizing the concept of the suite of incentives. And, as somebody who has a little experience going through the program from the private side, it feels to me like, the financing program, if you take the long view on these issues, it's evolving, and there was that 70s period we talk about where it was heavy with grants. And so the loan conditions, it seems to me, were a little more restrictive. And it's a natural evolution on this subordination issue, for instance. There's just a lot more financing mechanisms out there. And for us to presume we need to be the senior lien holder, that may have been a workable policy to protect the fund in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. I feel, and I would welcome comment on this, really what kind of risk are we taking to our AAA rating, in real terms, to be more flexible in looking at parity with different funding sources, especially when you look at the overall health of the organization we're dealing with. So, you can speak to that, but it seems to me the risk is not as great as what may have been contemplated when these structures were originally set up. So it seems like that's something, and you've already indicated, a willingness to look at case by case, and I think that's important. And then similarly, a straight amortization, that I can see that's really a staff time saver, but maybe it's not that big a deal. Maybe you could, give me a comfort level that by taking on those year-to-year restructuring, just as long as we hit the end game without the balloon effect, that, we're not overburdening our efforts. But so those are some thoughts I have. I think I'm taking Vice Chair Spivey Weber's suggestion pretty seriously, because I think we were able to respond to the governor's direction to provide additional incentive and maybe avoid some misunderstandings when that December 1st date comes along, and still deal with the overall demand for the need to develop recycled water. So I'm considering it.
Now I have both members' comments to respond to. First, if I can get clarification from the vice chair on your proposal. What you're proposing is a 1% with the application period opening March 18th and extending all the way through December 1st, 2015.
Correct.
Okay. I would support that. And Member Moore, let me understand, at least let me ask a clarifying question. With respect to the senior debt, are you proposing that we remove that from consideration, period, or are you saying that you're comfortable with what staff is suggesting in terms of considering the senior lien issue on a case-by-case basis?
I'm comfortable with considering on a case-by-case basis, and I feel, having some experience in the program, that requirement of subordinating other funding can be quite burdensome and hold us back, hold the program back, maybe unnecessarily, considering the risk to the fund of having more parity with other financing sources. So I'm supporting the case-by-case. I would welcome policy discussion on this item, in terms of if staff wanted to articulate, how these case-by-case procedures are going, and if it would be worth us considering, but I'm not proposing that at this time.
I'm supporting of considering it on a case-by-case basis. I think your point about, discussing how staff goes about making that determination on a case-by-case basis is a good point. I don't know if it's something that we can get into today because it may be outside of the scope of this issue. My understanding is that the whole issue of senior lien and criteria for making exception to that is specified in guidelines that the board adopted, which is not before us today. So that may be something for a subsequent discussion or another day. But then, yes, I would agree with you that considering it on a case-by-case basis is the way to go.
Can someone give me the contra? I mean, I have to say I have a gut reaction looking at it that the 0.5% will goose more projects and make them more affordable for folks. To me, it's not just we're going to hit the 400 or a 600 or 800. I want to see projects happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so, to me, intuitively, doing a 0.5% for some period of time is a very strong signal, but doing it forever could be foolhardy from a financial standpoint. And then you have the argument that I think Mr. Darling was trying to make, and I think has been our philosophy in some ways, which is if we spend it, more will come. Sometimes that's risky. You've got to, but if we don't spend it, more won't come in terms of SRF money or trying to get bond money. And so I found the argument for doing 0.5% for some period of time more appealing than doing the math at a bigger number to begin with, because what the driving, I think this is the most important thing this state can do, and we'll be doing this for decades, because it's the only way we survive what's coming with climate change, is to go where Israel is or other countries are and get to 90% recycling, because it's not just a one-time gain, it's you're using the same water over and over. That's where we're going to have to go, and that technology is there to go there. So I see this as an increasingly large part of our portfolio and contributing to California's water future. So I'm not, but as between 600 or 800 and doing something that actually gets people to pay attention and come in and do a project that would not have happened otherwise, at least intuitively to me, the 0.5% for a short period makes sense to me. I was just thinking maybe it should be a little longer. So I'd love some discussion with staff about that.
But before staff answer that question, let me say this. I would agree with you with respect to the 0.5% if it applies to new projects that would not have come in otherwise. The way that staff is proposing it, and the way that at least I'm understanding it, is that 0.5% would apply from now until the end of the year, which includes projects already in the pipeline. And that's where I pause, because while, again, I appreciate the efforts that have been put in place, if the point here is to lower it to 0.5% for new projects that would not have happened otherwise, then it shouldn't apply to those that are already in the pipeline.
All right, so how do we deal with that?
Well, those were exactly the issues we were dealing with when we came up with the different scenarios.
Yeah.
I think we're making an assumption that projects are not coming in because of the interest rate, that 0.5% difference in interest rate. I personally, it's not intuitive to me that that's the case. I hear a lot more about subordination of debt. That's the top issue. Well, Gary's saying no, but that's the top issue that I hear about, particularly from some of the larger agencies that have large amounts of water that could be turned into recycled water. Next, I almost never hear about the interest rate. It's assumed that it's low compared to commercial debt, and going to 1% from 2.1% is cutting that rate yet again in half. So, I don't know. That's where I am.
Here's where I get that, and you talk with folks in the recycled water world more than the rest of us, I'm assuming, but I'm not sure are you talking to people who aren't in our system or talking to us all the time? So I'm thinking there's other people out there that might come in, and I see the coalition proposal that surveyed everybody and all the work they did with staff, and this is not a fall on your sword issue, but intuitively, even if some folks are in it, I know it's not as precise. It just kind of makes sense to me to go with what was proposed, but given all the work everybody's done. But again, it's not a fall on your sword. I'd rather go with the stuff that people have been working on really hard.
Well, I'm going to kind of weigh in here, but don't have a strong opinion. I'm just kind of in a quandary about where to go on this. If we went with 1% versus the half and the 1 in the different stages, what is your estimate on what would be left over at the end of the period of December 1st, 2015?
So I make sure I answer this. When you say leftover, how many projects do we estimate would be left not being funded is difficult for us to say. What I can tell you, we've looked at how much money would we have available at 1%? For sure, 800 million we could make available. The reason for the 400 million with 0.5% factor came in because we would anticipate this will accelerate when we would have to go into the bond market ourselves, sell bonds, which we have to pay back with the interest. And so if we're at 0.5%, we can't pay back the interest. So we have cash in the bank today that we want to get out the door, and we want to encourage projects. That's where we were looking at that financial issue. So whereas we go with 1%, we can stretch it longer, that we don't think we'll have to go into the bond market, and so we have more money available to fund projects. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, again, getting back to the areas of the state where this is not a tool that's used as much. And does the 0.5% create such a frenzy? You know, you got a big sale going on, and really get folks to think about it in areas of the state where, and plus in combination with the drought, maybe we'd see even more of an interest, so that survey, next time you take it, you'd see a lot more than what you're seeing now. So I kind of like the idea of a half, but at the same time, I worry about projects that are coming in that are going to miss that opportunity, especially in areas where they have not participated. So there's
Yeah, unfortunately, we
Pros and
couldn't,
cons, yeah.
do it forever because we'd run out of money, right?
Correct. We can't do 0.5%
Right.
forever. No.
Yeah, it's just interesting choices.
Well, let me just, so that we can move forward. I move that we amend the proposal to 1% from now until till December 1st, was it, 2015?
Yeah, can I make one,
And we either go up or
Suggestion
down, and then we move on.
I would suggest if what you're trying to do, Fran, is the projects that we already have in-house, it sounded like you wanted to include those, meaning the Victor Valley, who is here, and the Visalia project. If you wanted to include those, if you went back to the date of the proclamation for the 1%, all those projects moving forward would be included in the 1%.
Okay.
That's an interesting idea, too.
Okay,
I
so,
would suggest a friendly amendment that
Yes.
The loan amount cap be changed from 600 million to 800 million
Right.
if you were going to go with that.
Right.
so I move that we have 1%, substitute 1% for the 1/2 and 1%, that we